of spoiler season for Zendikar Rising, and things are looking pretty exciting for the third visit to this fan-favourite plane. Couple that with the long-awaited and somewhat surprise return of online web fiction to accompany the set, there are a lot of reasons to get on the hype train. Welcome to Magic the Flavouring, the Magic the Gathering podcast, where we talk about all things magic, flavour, design and lore. I'm your host, Andy Mann.
Hello, this is Nathan Cancel.
And we are on the Zendikar Rises, or Rising. Is it Zendikar Rises or Zendikar Rising? Zendikar Rising.
Yeah, it's Rising. It's not.
We are on the...
Fantastic start to the
episode.
Oh,
fucked up straight away. We're on the Zendikar Rising hype train today. But I'm not surprised I messed that up, to be honest, because it is, like, if we were exhausted last week with the 2 weeks previous of, like, spoilers and reveals and all that kind of stuff, boy, have they not slowed it down for this week, right?
No, right. And now also I've got this amazing canon of, like, the opening of The Dark Knight Rises, of where you've got Bane going, yes, Zendikar Rises, which now the hype for that is even greater. So, but yeah, there's so much going on. Like, I was literally saying,
I didn't like that.
You didn't like that, no? Okay, well, that's like
that's like
Cloudfin Raptor. Like, that's our old school like way in joke. I thought you'd like that a lot. Okay, so you can cut it.
I'm sorry. No, it's there now. It's there forever.
Yeah, but no, I do agree. Like, I was just saying to you, like, I've just started work back up, which is fantastic. I'm not going to complain about it, but there has been an absolute slog of a slew of spoilers thrown in towards my brain space, and it's struggling to keep them all inside. So yeah, we're going to try and keep the giddiness.
Yes, but it is all good, and like I've been really, really happy with like the spoilers that have been so far. Just to put a timestamp on when we're recording this episode, for us, for you people in the future looking back on the past, us and our voices, our echoes into the infinite. We are the 4th of September 2020. To give you kind of like a more physical handle on when that is, they've literally just almost an hour before we started recording this episode, they've just released the second web fiction story, which is something we will talk about. Yeah, exactly. I've not read that. Nathan, have you read that?
No, I have not had time. But yeah, no,
I do know what it's about. I read the blurb, so we can talk about that. We are only going to talk today about the tremendous amount of hype we have for Zendikar Rising. We obviously know, as you do, people listening at this point in time, that on the same time they did Zendikar Rising, they also released all of the set names and set details, at least the sort of like bare face of it, for all of next year, or at least like all the mainline sets and a couple of the supplementary sets. We can't talk about that right now.
That is crazy bonkers. There's loads of stuff that I'm still getting my head around. So yeah, that can wait.
And I think you guys listening to us now barely struggle listening to us when we're hitting the 1 hour 20 mark. If you want to listen to a 4-hour podcast, then you let us know, and we will do that. But we're not going to do that. We will do that next week.
Such a commitment.
Zendikar stuff. Oh man, I know. Tell me about it. We will do that next week, and we will talk about more Zendikar things next week. We'll probably have to do 3 spoiler episodes on the trot. But today, I'm hyped. Nathan, you're tired from work, but you are also hyped.
Man, yeah, the hype train is real. Don't worry.
It's very real. So we're going to be doing, each of us have got a top 5 hype things that we are absolutely here for Zendikar. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the full-length trailer that got dropped. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the first bit of web fiction, because web fiction is back. Hello.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, so we will get there. This might be a little bit of a long one still, even though we're not talking about half the stuff that they released in the past week. But there we go. So I think we're just going to jump into it. Oh, I've knocked my mic. Sorry about that. I think we're just going to jump into it. We've got 5 each, 5 hype things. We're going to alternate as we go. Nathan, or as you've put yourself here on the outline, Nate's dog.
Yeah.
I don't like that either.
No, Jen, I didn't think you would.
You kick us off, mate. You do the thing. Let's go. Top 5 hype things.
Yeah, I'm going to brag a little bit, because the first thing that we're going to talk about is the dual lands. I'm not going to say that, called it and was the only one who did so, but I'm so glad that this is actually almost exactly what I thought was going to happen, because I think it's one of the ways that they can do it. The fact that they haven't done typings for them, so like plains, island, swamp, all that nonsense. Obviously, what I've realised is there's a big a cross axis basically of things that work with fetches, and then the best they can do ignoring the fetches. And what's really interesting, there was a blog by Maro recently where he's basically saying, like, once you take that type line out of it, they can really push dual lands. And what I feel like that is saying is, like, we made fetch lands too strong, so the only way to balance it out is to try and make really, really strong dual lands that aren't fetchable, and yet they still won't be played because fetch lands are still played.
Sure.
But saying that, art-wise, I think these might be... I think I say this about every set, because I think they just do better and better. But these might be the best full art treatments I think I've seen of anything. They are stunning. I only really got to see them about
Yeah.
like 3 hours ago when they were like all in one space in like big aspect ratio, and they are absolutely phenomenal.
They do a really good job as well. So the flip lands, for those of you that don't know, or the flip duels, is pretty much as it sounds. So some of the lands are a spell on one side, and then on the other side they're a land. And is it that you can choose which side you use?
Yeah,
How
yeah.
does that
Well, it's
work?
kind of like modal. So like, you know how back when we had fuse cards and split cards and everything like that, they were always instants or sorceries or a combination of both. Basically, you decide on the stack which one you want to play. These ones, you decide how they're going to be on the battlefield. So they're permanent. They don't transform. They don't have any transform mechanics. Obviously, you can interact by, say, bouncing them back to your hand and then playing them to the other side. But you basically select which side you want them to come in as, either the land side, or be it, say, the creature side for the ones that do have creatures and lands. For the dual land specifically, it will come in either as a blue land or as a white land. You choose as you put it onto the as you put it into play.
Yeah, really, really cool. And I think the best thing about these is one of the best things that we said about flip permanents in general, whether it was creatures from things like Innistrad or whatever else, is that they really help tell a story, right? So because they have this flip space, because they have this kind of transform space, not only do you get basically double the amount of real estate, sorry, I can't talk today, double the amount of real estate for your card, but you also get to tell like a better story with it, right? So I'm just looking down all the flip lands here. There was one which really caught my eye, which was the
is it the pathway, the lava glide and the river glide?
Yes, that's it, exactly. Yeah, so the Lava Glide and the River Glide. So you have a River Glide pathway is one side of it, which is blue, and then you have Lava Glide pathway, which is the red one. And on it, you see the artwork. You've got a core kite sailor, so it's basically like a paraglider going through these different regions, and just the whole feel and atmosphere of the card is told completely different with the same. It's just a land with a character on it, right? But you have this kind of sense that it's the same sky sailor just going through all these different terrains, and it's just a really cool concept, which I think they couldn't do that on any other card, right?
I think, yeah, absolutely. What I like is in most of these, there is, I mean, actually, I'm going to say all of them now that I'm looking at them. They all have people within them. Like the one that's really interesting is Needle Verge Pathway and Pillar Verge Pathway. That's the white-red one, the Boris dual land. If they put them side to side, which they have done, say, on Mythic Spoiler, it almost looks like they're scaling either side of the same mountainside. Obviously, it's the same artist for both, and they've done this across all of them, but it has almost, this seems like the same character who is exploring vastly differing terrains, which kind of works flavor-wise with Zendikar's terrain being very malleable, being changes substantially at the flip of a coin. But it also shows that these are like remember those lands from Ixalan which had Jace in them. And it was actually quite nice to have a character within a land because it almost kind of it doesn't feel so bland. It doesn't feel like it's devoid of character and feeling, like it's got a person within it actually giving it some scale, giving it some foreboding aspect to it. So yeah, I think this is really clever. I think if it is that one paraglider going in one thing, I think now I look at it, one of them looks a bit more blue and one of them looks a bit more green. But it could be a different day, different outfit. Who's to say they don't have wardrobes?
Sure.
As you say, you get to do so much on one bit of cardboard. You get to show so much, and the fact that they have pushed the border right up to the edges again is just so pretty, so pretty.
Yeah. On the non-full art treatments, there's one which I was really interested in as well. It's a spell, so it's a red one. So you've got Kazul's Fury as the spell, and it shows Kazul, Tyrant of the Cliffs, who was a legendary ogre, and he's got a whole backstory going on, right? Which I'm not going to get into here. I think we explored it in a Cracker Pack episode that I did on YouTube. So you got Kazul's Fury as the spell, and then on the other side you have Kazul's Cliffs, right? So again, you have this whole backstory, which is pretty much his whole thing, is that he's the ruler of this cliffside on this continent. So you get to explore that all in an uncommon land where you wouldn't have space for that otherwise, even on his own creature card. So yeah, really cool. Flip lands, you were spot on, and yeah, super flavorful. Cool. My first hype thing is the new color space for creatures. So we have yet to see the full gallery of spoilers, but we have actually got a lot. They've pumped out the spoilers quite a bit recently. And the thing which I'm really sort of excited for is that, I mean, like in every set in Magic, they kind of put tribes of creatures into colors, right? So whether they're going for monocolor, dual color, tricolor, whatever the hell the thing of the plane is, they always try and pocket people because it's nice and easy to do that. For this set and for Zendikar in general, that's sort of been the same, but they've not relied heavily on it. But they've still kept things like the vampires, for example, can generally only be found in black white, and the core are generally only just mono white. We did see a little bit of divergence of that in the last set. So in the last time we went to Zendikar, we had for the cores we had Ailey, Eternal Pilgrim, who was a black white core, and then there was a red white core. Is it Munda? What's the legendary?
I think Mundu. Ooh, you've asked a good
Ooh,
question.
but yes, we had a Boros core. But for all the other ones, they kind of kept them within their little box. But they've really let the legendaries kind of spread out a little bit in the color pie. So, for example, we have, and this has only been for the legendary so far. So I wonder if they'll do it for regular creatures. But you've got Zargas, Thief of Heartbeats, who's a black-red vampire, which doesn't seem in the context of Magic too revolutionary, but it is for Zendikar. I looked back at all the other Zendikar sets. There's never been a red vampire in a Zendikar set, so here we go. We've got Ora, Skyclave Hierophant, who's a core cleric. Again, we've got this black white cleric, which was the same as Ailey, but those are the only two that go into black as far as the core are concerned. Linvala, Shield of Seagate, is a white-blue angel, which the angels have never been blue on Zendikar, so it's really exciting to see her. Another returning character as well. Zareth? Yeah, Zareth San, the Trickster, a black-blue merfolk. No black merfolk on Zendikar prior to this guy, so it's nice to see him branch out. You got Yasharn, who's a elemental, who's green-white. There have yet to be white elementals on Zendikar. And Omnath as well, who's 4-color. And I know Omnath is one of your top 5, so I won't talk too much about him. But he is now white as well. So yeah, they're really letting these legendary creatures kind of explore new space. And I think it just makes the plane seem just a bit more alive, a bit more real. Like I know I'm kind of coming at this from the aspect of Zendikar was never my favorite plane, and I've said it on this show several times that coming into Zendikar Rising I wanted to be grabbed in with something slightly new, and this wasn't one of the things I thought would grab me in, but it has done. Seeing the game designers, even if it is just for certain legendaries, and maybe it's for like a game balance thing, but pushing tribes of creatures into new color space makes the kind of spectrum of color on certain planes seem a bit more real. Like it would be silly that all vampires on the plane are just black or white. You know, some of them would bleed into other things. So yeah, I think it's really cool.
I think that's really clever. That's a really good thing you pointed out. I mean, I was going to say the joke is that because the last time we were on Zendikar, we had the Eldrazi completely ruining color for Magic on Zendikar whatsoever. They just now they've forgotten kind of what colors everything is, and so Zendikar kind of just goes, well, we can't remember really anymore. So I guess I'm also red. But no, it's funny that you say that, because I agree. The thing that makes me feel more realistic is the wrong word, but diversity is actually much more realistic than, say, having every single core be a white creature, and it makes the set feel too shoehorned in and too narrow, because you don't really have any diversity. Exactly, and the whole point is, if you also think, and we'll talk about this a little bit about the party mechanic, because they're doing such cool things with classes as well, and diversifying where classes can go. So having wizards in white, having certain creature types matching up with classes they haven't before. It does generally feel like Zendikar's kind of reinventing itself. I mean, there is obviously a mild retcon to the set anyway, because they are basically kind of doing away with the whole Eldrazi-ness and kind of going, well, what was Zendikar before the Eldrazi came? And if anything, it's quite nice to see that Zendikar was this vibrant, diverse plane. It wasn't so typically, it's not like Eldraine where you've got the 5 different courts, so everything kind of has to be narrowed down into these kind of functional specificities. Whereas with Zendikar, it's almost like, no, if with the plane's so crazy and everything's so upturned that if anything, there should be this, as you say, diversity across creatures types, across their class types, and across the colors in general. So yeah, I think it's good that you highlight that, because it makes it feel more realistic, but not even realistic, but more genuine, more believable,
more sincere. You're right. And it seems that, especially like with the party mechanic, again, it's something you want to talk about, so I won't step on your toes too much, but it definitely seems like for this set, they're relying less on creature type and more on class type as part of the mechanic. So yeah, it's a lot easier for a merfolk to do a certain thing versus, in other sets or even other versions of Zendikar where merfolk were only this prescribed thing and they couldn't move outside of that. But yeah, I don't think they'll probably do it with all their regular creatures in the set, but as far as the legendaries are going so far, for the ones that are more than just one color, they seem to be doing some interesting shit. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they can do more of. Cool. All right, Nathan, you're up next.
Yeah, so off the back of that, like you said about legends, like looking through the ones we've got already, there are some really interesting designs. You've got, like, say, Tabarax, the Demon Cleric, which is a really interesting kind of combination. Also, Phylath, which is one of the ones we've just recently had today, the World Sculptor, which is really interesting. I mean, I think sometimes they give names to things that sound like they're actually way more important than they end up being. But also, you can't say World Sculptor and it not be something quite integral. I think the elementals in general, even from the first story, we've seen that the elementals kind of, I feel like, are going to be highlighted a bit here. Ashai, we've seen, is still in the plane. Omnath is still in the plane and he's developing. So these are all like really big time elementals. The thing I put this down for is hopefully it means that we don't not see Kazul. Hopefully we don't just see the modal spell from earlier. We've seen someone like Lavinia. We've seen a few fan favorites kind of come back with a slight twist. There are a bunch of other ones that we haven't seen before. I can't remember off the top of my head, but there's a cleric, a legendary cleric who basically does what scrap scavenger does for artifacts, of where whenever a cleric dies, you get a cleric back that's less converted mana cost, which shenanigans aplenty will occur, I'm sure. But these are really interesting things that to be able to do with classes, because typically they haven't been pushed so much, and now we're in a modern kind of way of dealing with Magic. Since Lorwyn, power creep is a big thing, so it's nice to see them flex into classes when they have had a slew of new cards across, and I think you have the right legends to do so. The fact they've got a legendary that every time you play a land you get an additional combat step is bonkers.
Is that the Minotaur?
That's the Minotaur, yeah, exactly. Again, they just came out today. The names will eventually permeate into my brain, I'm sure, but off the top of it, I can't remember. But they're clearly playing with interesting designs, as not just at the common level and across the normal races, but even at the legendary level, which I think is really cool.
Sure. All right, then. Well, let's move swiftly on. We've got a lot to talk about. So the next thing that I'm super hyped for, and this is probably my big thing, it's no surprise to people who've been listening to this show that this is going to be one of the things that we're excited for. And it's the overall art style, separate from the aesthetic, because I'm actually going to talk about the aesthetic of the plane as a separate thing later. But specifically, the art style for this set is absolutely nutterbutters, right?
Agreed. Yes,
they've been knocking it out. They've been knocking it out of the park. Every single set, they keep bringing something new to the table, and they might have. But the thing is, though, they might have like maybe 10 cards, which I can group them together and be like, these are the cards that prove to me that Magic is just getting better as an art style. And again, it's a totally subjective thing. I know plenty of people that do the opposite. They'll pick the 10 cards which maybe the art on them's a little bit questionable and use that as proof that art in Magic is getting worse, which I think is just, shut the fuck up. Get on with it. It's the game, But like, this is just undeniable. And the biggest sign that it's undeniable that the game's getting better at art is that Wiley Beckett is back.
Right.
This is the artist that we've been championing now for a while. The card that I sort of highlighted a few episodes ago was the Final Strike.
Finishing Strike.
Yeah,
Finishing Blow.
Finishing Blow.
Yeah,
My God. Finishing Blow. One of those generic. It's just a generic black spell, right? It's got one of those names. But Finishing Blow, which was in M21. And yeah, the artwork on that, we were like, yep, this is the one. And we've spoke about Wiley every time we've spoken to an artist, we've mentioned Wiley Beckett. And they've brought her back. She's got 2 spells. She's got Soul Shatter and Thwart the Grave. Both of them are black spells. Doesn't really matter what they do in terms of what this is, but like the Soul Shatter shows a dragon getting sort of pierced with a laser beam, some sort of black laser beam from between 2. I don't think it's hedrons that are piercing the dragon. They've got hedrons around the dragon, but it's being pierced by 2 sort of like points with a laser.
Yeah, I think this is
just pretty
the new,
cool.
like the ancient core technology. I think is what they're hinting.
Yeah.
So
like a trap in some sort of sky haven. And then Thwart the Grave is, again, this is very much like Seb McKinnon, where it's very sort of open knowledge that whenever an art director has a spell where they have to have a super abstract idea of what the concept of the spell is. It's like I recently listened to our Titus Lunter episode the other day, and it's when we were talking to him about how do you do a composition for an enchantment, like, because it's such a difficult thing to express. And Seb McKinnon's one of the people that they go to kind of give all these very abstract thoughts to put down as an image. And this is one of those. So Thwart the Grave is essentially it's a reanimation spell, but the artwork on it shows a figure falling through something, I don't know, but there's like a mess of hands and fingers at the top of the image that are kind of coming down to grab the figure from falling through this kind of abyss. But the colors on it, the sort of pencil detail, the ink wash, all of it on this one and Soul Shatter is just mind-bogglingly good. Like, it shouldn't. We haven't seen this on a Magic card really. Even with people like Seb McKinnon, like Wiley Becker is just raising the bar yet again. And I was on social seeing all the spoilers coming out with everyone else, and I remember when we spoke about finishing Blow, there was a few people that went, yes, Wiley Becker, you're absolutely right. They are going to be the next superstar. And like, we were quite late to the party on getting on board the Wiley Becker hype train. And then when Thought the Grave came out and Soul Shatter, everyone was talking about these cards and then being like, oh, and she's also done Finishing Blow, and she did some showcases in Eldraine, and oh my god, this artist. And I think now, like, the secret is very much out that this artist is going to be the next big thing. And it's good. It's really good.
Yeah, it's really interesting considering, like, I'm looking at Thought the Grave now, again on Mythic Spoiler, and it's up against Nicholas Gregory's Swarm Shambler. And Swarm Shambler is a really cool, it's a really well rendered art piece of art. And it's almost like Wiley Beckett kind of gets halfway and goes, you know what? That's kind of all I need to do. Like, it's almost under rendered. It's almost that kind of like sketches do have a certain appeal to people because it does have that rough kind of natural feel. It doesn't feel like it's over polished, it doesn't feel like it's been over stylized or it's been overly over edited or anything like that. And as we were saying earlier about how the art style across the entire set is really, really good, and each individual card you look at and you go, oh my god, that's amazing. But because there is a certain difference to the way that she does things, it does pop way more. And this is the kind of thing we're talking about when we see alternate styles that are very against the typical grain, typically with things like Secret Layers, of where you kind of want this diversity because it does make everything else pop. But if everything has this kind of homogenized look of, cool digital pictures that can look absolutely stunning, don't get me wrong, I don't remember it as much as, like, as soon as I saw Soul Shatter, I was like, that's Wiley Beckett. That's Wiley Beckett. I don't know why I got so excited, but my brain did, and it recognized it, and it appealed so much.
It's an exciting artist. Yeah. It's an exciting artist that, people always want more of Nils Harm and more of Seb McKinnon because their kind of style is what makes the game so great. And yes, if we saturate the game with all of that style of art, then it starts to become not so special. But the niche which artists like Wiley Beckett have kind of fallen into is that it's not like they're just another Seb McKinnon or another Nils Harm. It's like they've got their own pocket of art style, and it's just another special thing that we can latch onto and look out for in a set. And there are other artists which have kind of, like, even if they're maybe more experienced in Magic the Gathering than Wiley Beckett is, like Drana, the Last Blood Chief, which is a returning legendary, by the way. Very, very cool. The artwork for Drana is by Tyler Jacobson, who's done several fantastic arts for Magic the Gathering. Is no sort of slouch himself. But you can definitely tell that the art director, when he was looking at maybe the black cards, was wanting this kind of illustrated style. So Drana here has got lots of pinks, lots of red hues. Everything is sort of very flowy. But the thing I really love about this piece is that she's got a kind of flow of blood going up to her hand, and it's all big and swishy and wavy right up to the point where it's near her hand, and then it goes at a vicious right angle and straight into her palm, which is kind of where you can sort of see the magic kicking in, like, so around Drana's hand, and just that little detail is just so cheeky and so fun.
I read that in the other way. I read it that she's cut her hand and it's dropping directly, and then that's when the magic goes and it swells. But maybe
that's I don't know.
I don't know, actually. Now I think about it, it's hard to tell. I mean, the thing is,
it's interesting.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. Like, trying to, I think we'll have to do a little like a lore episode where we talk about, like, the vampires and the core and everything like that, outside of spewing rhetoric about how cool the art styles are. But yeah,
sure. But I think now that we're getting web fiction back, which we'll talk about soon, we'll be able to do literal, like, we won't have to speculate where they've been. No, right? We will know because they will be in the story.
We've got actual story. Amazing. I know. I'm so excited.
I know. I won't talk about them too much, but just another couple of art pieces which I just want to highlight to show that I'm not just talking about the black spells, because I think everyone knows I'm a bit of a black mage. The two lands which have just knocked me for 6, and these are only just 2 examples of almost the entire image gallery. Like, I'm not joking. This set looks fucking phenomenal. We got the Chase Stone Mountain full art, which is just mind-bogglingly good. I think I've used that phrase twice.
Yeah, no, that's fine. You can do that.
So all of the full arts are great, and all of them show the scope and sort of range of Zendikar, which, if we remember, is one of the things I wasn't too hot on in previous sets. I felt like it was too big. But this almost pushes it even further, that it makes things that much more dynamic. And we'll talk about this a little bit when I start looking at the aesthetic of the plane rather than just the art style. Like, the Chase Stone Mountain is just great. And then we also have Anna Steinbauer's Island. Anna Steinbauer's Island, which is another full art, which is a direct reference to the Cup Island by Vincent Pruce in previous Zendikar sets. but this time it's several of them, and they've all got like these kind of crystalline. I'm guessing they're stone structures, but
Yeah,
they look quite
this is like
crystalline,
ancient
rising at the top
core
of it.
architecture. Yeah, the way they do like diamonds
Yeah,
and straight edges is very ancient core. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, I mean, yeah, no surprise we were going to talk about art at some point, but genuinely, if the art wasn't as good, I might have still been a little bit meh on this set, but it looks bloody great.
Yeah, it's very intimidating how like every single card is so good. Like,
Yeah,
I'm not saying because it's very rare that you can pick out like forgettable cards, but I'm looking through and every single one. I'm like, yeah, yeah, and that, and oh god, yeah, inundated with beauty, bevy of
mm.
riches. What was like? Oh, so I'm going to follow off on the same kind of thing here because I had a couple that I really wanted to talk to. Quickly, what are we referring to the alternate artworks on this one? You know, the expeditions. What are they? Are they not the expeditions?
Oh,
You know what I mean?
just the alternate art. I
Yes,
think they're still called
they
showcase.
are just
Yeah,
showcase.
I think they're called showcases in this one.
Okay, cool,
I
cool,
think
cool.
that's kind of the term they're going to be using moving forward for the non-premiere alternate arts, which you might be able to find in some packs, but are mostly going to be in the collector boosters. I think they're called showcases. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about it quickly because the way that they've done this is that because they've done a dumpster diamond hedronic kind of effect, and it plays perpendicular to the regular, so at 45 degrees basically. It kind of extends the border naturally whilst also adding an additional kind of hedron border to the bottom and the top. The reason I bring this up is because the Philinda, Prowling Philinda by Tyler Smith is so unbelievably striking. The color palette on it is absolutely gorgeous, and it's specifically the border that kind of gives it the opportunity and shows it off. Similar to how in Eldraine, some of the aspect of the border kind of play towards a fanciful side, especially with someone like Wiley Beckett, where we had a couple of cards from her, and it was almost like the border pushed and helped the art kind of like it elevated it. And it's the same thing with this. I think they keep doing really cool, interesting things with this to kind of. I don't even like know how. I guess there must be someone out there who keeps doing all of the different border works. But and whatever you're doing, buddy, like you're amazing. You're doing fantastic things.
Yeah.
The only other one I want to spew about is two artworks. One of them will lead into my next point. That's but they're both by Bastian Grivet, and he's not done. Oh, they I don't actually know Bastian. I assume is man, but they haven't done any other artworks apart from the Lotus Cobra showcase artwork and the Omnath showcase artwork. And holy nonsense, they are the most
Yeah, they're
vibrant,
good.
bright, evocative pieces of artwork I've seen in a long time. Like the colors on the Lotus Cobra are insane. Like it's super yellow, there's loads of pinks. Like this is almost like Lotus Cobra was pretty in the first original Zendikar. It had a little hint in the in its scales of having that rainbow effect, kind of like a Birds of Paradise, similar kind of aspect. But it's pushed to like the 9th degree in this. It's absolutely amazing. Really, 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 really pretty. In the same fashion, moving into what was going to be like my next hype point is Omnath. Yes, hype. He's back. 4 colors. That's not that unusual. We kind of knew that was going to happen. I mean, like, that's no great surprise. I mean, at this point, it is simply a matter of have they shot themselves in the foot of they now definitely have to make a 5-color one, otherwise people will riot. I think yes. I think people might potentially riot if they don't. The thing I point out about him is in both artworks, he is colossal. You can see it in the alt art a little bit more because there's a dude stood on a rock above a waterfall, and then there's Omnath above them, and they are like, he is absolutely huge. He's got to be a good 7 stories tall by regular building standards, and he looks like he's forming a bit of a basically he's developing, and I don't think he's developing into something nice. As much as he might be the locus of creation, as we've seen with some things, creating things usually requires some destruction to do so. But yeah, as an artist to kind of look out for anything that Bastian Grivet's going to be one of these artists I'm going to pick up immediately, kind of like with Wiley Becker. As soon as you see an artwork by them, it's going to be like, oh yeah, we know it's this person. And the fact they're able to get these kind of art styles in, because it doesn't seem very typically magic-y, almost, the Lotus Cobra, but at the same time, I quite like that.
Sure. Well, let's talk a little bit about Omnath's abilities, because you say that he might not be something nice, but I think they're going to go a little bit. This is me personally. I think they're going to go a little bit sort of amoral about him. I think he's going to be a little bit like how a lot of World Souls are kind of, they don't really care for the whims of the living in terms of the sentient races. They care more about the plane itself. So he's a 4/4 elemental, still just a 4/4. If that makes any difference. But yeah, so when
you're already a 4/4. I mean, yeah, considering the size of him, I do know what you mean. He does look like he's a bit bigger than a 4/4.
When Omnath, Locus of Creation, enters the battlefield, draw a card, and then he has landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 4 life if this is the first time this ability has resolved this turn. If it's the second time, add red, green, white, blue. If it's the third time, Omnath deals 4 damage to each opponent in each planeswalker you control. So
You don't control.
he does have. You don't control. Sorry. So he does have like these varied abilities that aren't just positive. They aren't just negative. They're not just destructive, but they're not just life gainy. Like he's kind of got the whole package. So I think they are making him up to be this kind of this big sort of toolbox of change, if you like, in all of his abilities. So yeah, and also because it's a landfall triggered ability, it obviously encourages you to keep playing literal lands onto your battlefield, growing the plane which you are playing on. So yeah, so I think he's going to be like more like a god. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like a
I know what you
world
mean. So
soul.
he's going to take a back seat and only step in if he has to. I mean, I guess we'll see we'll be able to not even speculate, but we'll be able to digest the story bit by bit as it happens. And obviously, week by week, we're going to get new stories, so it will help inform our discussion a little bit. But yeah, it's just a really, really striking alternate artwork. I mean, the regular artwork looks great as well, but yeah, the alternate artwork, the color palette across it is fantastic, and he is a very cool,
Sure.
very cool card. Yeah,
nice. So I'm going to move on then. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is, again, slightly different from the art style itself, like individual arts, is the general aesthetic of Zendikar. So as I said earlier, Zendikar never really grabbed me, and I think it's part of that is because I think I wasn't necessarily around that much for the first time we were there. So I didn't get that initial, like, oh my lord, this is my plane kind of feel that a lot of players do. And when we went back for Oath of the Gatewatch Battle for Zendikar, again, I think if you weren't totally into the Eldrazi stuff and you weren't necessarily into the allies as a creature typing, I think that set kind of passed you by because that was pretty much what it was all geared towards, and I wasn't into it. This time, the look of the plane and just the way that they're treating some of these characters is so cool. Like, it's just visually very fucking cool, right? So I've got a few cards here that I've got in front of me. I've got Core Blade Master, Kitesail Cleric, and Cliff Haven Sellsword. So all of these cards, they're core creatures, which are the kind of nomadic rock hopping race of the plane, and they're all just kitted out in all this kind of like ancient core armor. I know a lot of the storyline is going to be sort of revolving around like the ancient core race. All of their weaponry just looks a little bit more angular than we've seen it before, and everything just looks really dynamic all the time. I think my big problem with other Zendikar sets is that they were trying to sell this idea of the plane being in constant shift and everyone is kind of like a free bet, like a base jumper, like you have to be to kind of survive, or like, a deep sea dive or whatever. But none of the cards really, broadly speaking, got my sort of, blood pumping with that kind of idea. But these all seem really dynamic and like a lot of movement going on, and like even the lands, as we said earlier. So I'll take Kitesail Cleric for an example versus Core Skyfisher, which was a very similar card from a previous set. Both of them show Core with their big like paragliding gear, doing like going through all the cliffs and all that kind of jazz. But Kitesail Cleric is just so dynamic in what it's doing, and it's flying through all these different like hedrons and through the sky, and it's got a big light trail going behind it, and the sky's all lit up, and just all of his gear just makes him seem that much more, I don't know, adventure-y? Is that even a word?
yeah.
Like, I think just
Adventurous, I think is
everything
the word, but
adventurous, right? Everything just has that in spades, and I know that's what they're maybe trying to do, especially since the last time we went to Zendikar with the Eldrazi. As you say, they're trying to focus more on the party aspect, more on the adventure aspect, so everyone looks like their gear is actually there to help them navigate all this business. Another thing I've noticed as well with the angels that we've seen, so some of the angels, this is a bit of a side point, we don't really know where the angels are or what their deal is yet, because obviously we haven't had the stories just yet, because some of them still have their halos obscuring their vision and some of them don't, and some of the previous angels that we've seen that did have the obscuring visor halo have now lost it, right? So we don't quite know where the angels are in terms of that, but something we have noticed on a lot of their armor, so Emiria Captain is the card I've got in front of me, art by Matt Stewart. And this angel, the same as a lot of them, has kind of hedron armor on. So a lot of the armor that's on their shoulders or around their waist or whatever, whether they're actual hedrons or they're just armor shaped like hedrons, like they have this kind of more battle ready, heavy look to them, as opposed to these kind of, slightly above it all angels that we're used to seeing, even on places like Zendikar. And like the axe that the Emiria Captain is holding is this big, heavy looking two-handed battle axe. So yeah, I just think, I don't know what they're fighting, like, because the Eldrazi are gone. So I don't know why they're so souped up, but everyone just looks like they've sort of gotten their heaviest bit of plate armor,
Mm.
they've stuck it on, they've grabbed a rope and a hook, and they're just going to go fucking, flinging through the hedron
Mm.
networks. And it just looks really cool. It just looks like a lot more movement.
Yeah. I think it's funny because when we first went to Zendikar, we had cards like Balaged Thief, where it's someone like an actual Tomb Raider, like plundering a crypt, and then you had like even Core Hookmaster, for example, was
Mm.
kind of card. It did genuinely feel like you got grappling hook as one of the equipments, and it was one of these things. If it did genuinely feel like you were, equipping yourself up to go out on an adventure, like not necessarily adventure, like a quest, an expedition. And one of the things it's interesting that you say about how like, everyone's like super bad battle ready and equipped up. Do you know what the cool flavor aspect of that is? What does every single equipment in the set so far do?
Oh, I don't know.
It auto equips when you cast it.
Oh, that's true.
Every
That is
single one
true.
of them auto equips when you cast it. So this idea of not even the equipment is more active. I think what I like about this is probably one of I'm going to say as boldly, this is probably one of the best retcons across any medium that I've ever experienced. In terms of it's not so much that they slap you in the face with it. It was something that the fans definitely really wanted, and they've done it in a way that feels dynamic. It reinvigorates the plane. It kind of makes you even forget about that. Oh no, it's fine. We're back to what we wanted, but they've done it even better. Oh, you wanted ruins? Oh, we've got even bigger ruins. Oh, you wanted equipment? Oh, we've got even faster equipment. You wanted everyone looking like they were doing cool stuff? Well, they do even cooler stuff in cooler places. Like everything about this is almost like we go, well, can we? Is Zendikar somewhere we can turn it up to 11? And everyone went, it should have already been at 15. What were you
Do you know
doing?
what? I think this may be it. Because I think maybe my issue was it wasn't that it was so much that it was too big and I only like sort of more down to earth planes, whatever. Maybe I just feel like the kind of adventure pitch just wasn't maybe visceral enough for me to really be like, yeah, like I feel like I'm flying through a bunch of like floating islands with a rope and like luck to like guide me. But they've done it in this set just for whatever reason. I don't know what they've necessarily changed, because I'm sure there are many cards. In fact, I know, because I own plenty of them from other Zendikar sets, which does have this aesthetic. I know it exists beforehand, but just for some reason, as you say, they've pumped the gas on it, and it's now just clicked. This is what I was saying a few episodes ago, that maybe this will be the Zendikar set that will make me appreciate what Zendikar is. And I think it's there. I think I'm there with it now.
It's also funny because this set didn't have expeditions, it doesn't have quests, it doesn't have traps, it doesn't have all of the things that maybe were a bit too. And again, I don't actually think the original Zendikar did bad by this, and I don't think any of these mechanics were necessarily poor, but they clearly didn't need any of them for it to make Zendikar feel like Zendikar again. To make all of these things be in place. I think there is one gripe I have in terms of like functionality, and I think that's that the way they did Kicker so far, and I don't think it's going to diversify, is super boring. Because every single card is just add more mana to make the effect bigger, which, yes, I understand from a limited point of view, scaling these effects is fantastic and it'll make for better gameplay. But realistically, you can ignore that side of it. But it's amazing. It's funny how, in terms of functionality and mechanics, beyond... Like even Landfall doesn't necessarily add to the adventuring side of it. The party mechanic does, but none of it doesn't necessarily need to have party on them. You don't need to have party in the card to make it feel adventurous. The name, the flavor text, the art especially. I think this is the big thing. This idea of the art, and the reason why I harped on about it is because Zendikar kind of relies on the artwork a lot to sell it. I think the aesthetics of the individual characters, and then the aesthetic of the world around them is what really sells and drives this away. And one of the things we said about the problem with Battle is that you looked at any Eldrazi and it was just the same as this pink purpley thing from another card, and it didn't have that kind of in interest. It didn't have intrigue, it didn't have depth to it. It was quite bland, whereas this has depth without having to space it across 16 different mechanics that kind of all tell you what things. They're not telling you, they're showing you, and that's what they say in all mediums: show, don't tell. And they are showing Zendikar very well right now.
Very well. Yeah, very, very well indeed. Cool, so that's me. You talking about party leads quite nicely onto your next high point.
Yeah, because this is kind of one of the things we said a little bit earlier. I think this idea of class tribalism is really, really interesting. And it's one of the things that I think made a lot of people that liked Lorwyn really like it. I think it's also one of the things that made a lot of people who didn't like Lorwyn not like it as a block, because it was a bit too shoehorned. Everything about it was about you need to be a warrior and then warriors do this. What I like about this is they've gone, no, you don't have to all be green. It's not about all the different shades of green that you have. Now it's about all the different colors on your palette that you have. And this idea that the way they've managed to do it, of having primary, secondary and tertiary classes across different colors, really helps, as you said, as we said before, diversify the classes and the creature types across different colors, make them feel more realistically widespread rather than it just being, you know, short, shoehorn and narrow. And also, as much as some people might be a bit sad about this, thank God they got rid of Ally. They got rid of the two creature types that ruined Zendikar in my eyes, and that was Ally and Eldrazi, because Ally just kind of turned everyone into a soldier. You know, it kind of just made it was Cliffhaven Vampire is a prime example of this. If it didn't need to be an ally in any way, shape, or form, but because the set kind of required a certain threshold of allies to make the mechanic work, they had to just tag ally onto everything, and then it started to feel like, well, what makes an ally an ally? Okay, everyone in the world is being killed by, you know, like we've got everyone like versus the Eldrazi, great. So then it's just Eldrazi versus every other creature type, and I hope it's got ally after it. And then the ones that didn't have ally are like, oh, do they not care about the Eldrazi type? That kind of thing, I think, from a meta point of view and a flavor point of view, just doesn't work. Whereas having 4 different tribes that all have their own diversity across their different creature types as well. Like a merfolk rogue is going to be different to a core rogue, for example. That's way more interesting to explore. And this idea of camaraderie, this idea of especially on the battlefield, I imagine it would feel really cool when you do get like your different adventuring parties. And you've done this. A load of people have done this on Twitter. Of what is your party? Like what is your what?
Yeah.
And I think that's amazing. The fact that they've managed to make everyone trawl through all of the rogues and all of the wizards, you know, and gone like, how can we? What would be my ideal adventuring party? This is what Zendikar was originally going to be. And I think what they did by doing the whole ally thing and making everyone feel like they're companions. Oh, that's a bit bad word. Not companion. Allies. The fact that they're putting all of these together and then kind of did it as a blanket terminology, if anything, kind of smothered it. You know, as you would with a fire, you chuck a blanket on it to smother it. Whereas with this, they've picked and highlighted the differences between them to then make that camaraderie feel better. And obviously in this day and age, highlighting and celebrating differences and individualism and diversity is exactly where we need to be. So it's almost like double meta, you know, in terms of how the world should be and how we should be working, and it works better within the set as well. Plus, a non-zero factor of this is it does set a preamble for the D&D set that's going to be coming out instead of the core set in next year. So I think that I think that they've done a lot of things in this set that will pave the way forwards if they're successful. Obviously, time will tell, but I can't imagine something like this party will be poor, because all it does is increase diversity throughout the set. And I think that's key to make sets, especially like Zendikar, we've already been twice and it's been ruined. It makes it feel back to being something that we actually can engage with and enjoy.
I really like that as a sentiment, the idea that it's a tribal mechanic that highlights the positive aspects of being different and having like individual skills. And yeah, you're right, of having almost like customization. They've been, I mean, Wizards of the Coast, it's no secret, have been frothing at the mouth, desperate to try and capture the Commander magic for more constructed and limited formats. And they've tried it with things like Companion. They're going to try it again with Commander Legends, the draft set later in the year. And I think this is in a slightly quieter attempt for them to go, people really like singleton format because it means that every card is different and it's fun through diversity. How can we try and do that with a limited environment? And it's like, how about we give people a payoff for having different kinds of creatures in their deck?
You benefit from not playing 3 of a type of card. You benefit from playing 3 different cards. Exactly, that's perfect. Yeah. So
I think that's really cool. I think you're bang on. I'm really hyped for Party. I wasn't hyped for it when I first saw it, but the more that people are exploring it and flavorfully what it means, and hopefully mechanically when we kind of get our hands on the cards, I'm kind of excited. And as it goes through the story, like the more story elements that get brought in, the more it kind of makes sense as far as like telling a story goes. Cool. My number 8 on our list, which I guess is my number 4. That's how maths works. Number 4. Is this is a really quick one because we have no backup for it yet. This is more of a hope that I'm hyped for. Is that we get more of a distinction between the core race, so again this nomadic race which I mentioned earlier, and the other humanoid races, specifically humans from Zendikar. So one of my biggest gripes with Zendikar as a plane, one of the big reasons I just kind of didn't really get into it, is because they had this race, this core race, that seemed to me really cool and did have a lot of history and did have a lot of backstory, but for some reason didn't seem as distinct to me as other humanoid races, things like Vidalcans or even dwarves on like planes like Kaladesh or whatever. The core just seemed to me to be other humans, because I don't know whether it's just a visual thing or whatever. But this set, and especially since the story which we've released and where the story seems to be going, which we'll talk about in a minute, but essentially it seems to be that the ancient core race of the Sky Havens, the kind of ancient core empire, their ruins are now being rediscovered. So it's almost like they're going to be a little bit more distinct. They've got a bit more of their own aesthetic, again, with the types of armor they have. And yeah, I just hope, I'm kind of excited to see another humanoid race get a bit more limelight, and especially because they're only found on Zendikar. I kind of feel like this could have been another plane where you could have gone, do we need humans? We've got vampires and core and elves. Like, I don't know if humans are really necessary. So yeah, I'm hyped to see more of the core.
Yeah, I think the reason why they didn't feel so different before is because they were the equipment tribe, and you can equip equipment to any creature. So what made the core special about it? I mean, yeah, they got benefits from having equipment, but any creature gets the benefit of the equipment from having the equipment on it. It's also interesting to say that obviously elves have a much longer standing in like fantasy fiction, but the difference between a core and a human, for all intents and purposes, is they're paler and they have weird tendrily bits on their chin if they're a guy. Elf versus human, they've got pointy ears. Like vampires, well, they're paler and they've got teeth. Like, there's actually not that much distinction. So yeah, as you say, it's about time they've tried to create a way to make them feel different. Obviously, like life longevity makes elves kind of feel more aloof, you know, and less mortal and more whimsical. Whereas I think also looking at how the story is going to focus on the ancient core and everything that's all about them, I think that the core will naturally kind of find their own diversity. Humans should be the most boring, you know, tribe in any set, because they are just, you know, they're humans. They're the only real one that we have to compare it against. So it's not particularly interesting. So yeah, it's better that they give all the core cards that they do have some actual integrity, you know, stylistically and narratively. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I think my last one was so we kind of already spoke about this, but this kind of adds all of these things in together, because the one I wanted to talk about was the modal mythic spells / bolt lands is what I'm going to call them. Bolt lands because they are single color lands, so it'd be like, say, it would tap for a red, but if you want it to come in play untapped, you take 3 life instead of the 2 life that, say, shock lands used to. It's only 1 color. You don't get to have the diversity of having 2 colors, but on the other side, it's an instant / sorcery spell. And the one I'm going to highlight is Shatter Skull Smashing. And on the other side is Shatter Skull, the Hammer Pass. We haven't actually seen Shatter Skull as a land yet, which is quite nice. Interesting that these also aren't legendary. I don't know why, when you haven't given them the mountain subtype, that you don't then give them legendary. But then the precedence was that Valakut never got the legendary thing, Magosi never got a legendary thing, like Myria never got a legendary thing. So it's not as if this isn't normal for Zendikar lands. They're not particularly legendary. Even the Shatter Skull, it's just another cliffside. But the reason I bring it up is even across the 2 artworks, what is nice is if you play it narratively as the land, you get the land and you get to explore the land, and lovely, fantastic. But then if you don't want the land, you want to use the land, you're using the spell, and it's basically, so in the Shatter Skull Hammer Pass, you've got a load of floating rocks, as they want to do on Zendikar, because gravity doesn't exist. On Shatter Skull Smashing, it's almost like you've gone and you've activated gravity, and suddenly all the rocks are smashing down, and it's almost like you're activating the land. So instead of just being like, tap the land for mana, it's like, no, I'm using the land as an offensive spell. Okay, I don't need it as an offensive spell, I can just have it as the land. You know, that idea is really interesting to me as well. What is the land representing when you want to use it just as a typical land? And then what does it represent actively? Like, what is it doing? Because the other one we've had is the Seagate Restoration, of where the active spell side shows you developing it, and then on the other side it's reborn. And it's nice, it kind of shows a story, and as you say, like earlier, about giving narrative to lands is really interesting and really cool, because typically they don't, you know, typically it's just the basic at the back of the pack. So that's a really, really cool idea, this idea of giving it some movement. You know, it's got some I can't remember what the word I'm looking for is. It was an intelligent one, I promise, but yeah. Oh god, dynamism. Yeah, it's dynamic. You know, there we go, that's the word. Fantastic, amazing.
Yeah, that's the tagline for this whole episode, is Zendikar Rises. Fuck me, it's dynamic.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, really, that is a great tagline, because it's true. Like, you know, if the lands are rising, then that is, I don't know how much more dynamic you can get lands to be apart from on Zendikar, you know. So yeah, it's good that they made it work.
Cool. Well, my last one then, my absolute last one for the hype train, is very simple. It won't take long at all. I think it's just very clear cut. We've got enchantment removal in black. It's about time. And Oh, I guess it wasn't flavorfully unfeasible either. So the card in question is, well, that's because that's always what
White
they
can't
do with these.
flavorfully get card draw. They say after printing 6
Yeah,
cards, it gives white card draw when they realise they have to back
yeah,
out the
right.
statement. Yeah, no, of course, yeah.
I know it's all flavorfully relevant. It's just how you get there and which ones are better and which ones aren't. But whatever. I don't work at WOTC. I don't make the game. But feed the swarm. Feed the swarm is the card. 1 and a black sorcery. Which sorcery rather than instant, I guess, is also pretty good for nerfing it a little bit. Destroy target creature or enchantment an opponent controls. You lose life equal to that permanent's converted mana cost. So yeah, it does the black thing. You pay some life to get the effect, and it's strictly worse than things that you would find in green. It's strictly worse than some things you'd find in white. But it also does the thing, and it destroys a creature or enchantment as opposed to an artifact or enchantment, which white and green likes to do. And yeah, I saw a really great quote. I'm so annoyed that I can't remember who said it because it's like I'm stealing their thing. But if you're listening to this and you said this, then please let me know. But someone said on Twitter, it's as if they've realised, the people who make the game, that the idea of black is you can do anything, but it will cost you.
Yeah.
Black should be able to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the kind of the penance almost that you have to pay, or the physical or emotional cost which takes for you to do anything should be equal to, or even sometimes greater than the actual thing that you're trying to do. It's the same reason that aristocrats, aristocrats exists as a playstyle, right? And I wonder, maybe the reason that they've not done this, because it's such a simple card and it seems like such a simple solution, but I think maybe the reason they haven't done this yet is because if they're thinking for something like a limited environment, it would maybe put people off from playing black, or they just play something else in the slot. And for something like Commander, the cost for doing that, you're only really running black in this card in black decks because of the color identity. So you're playing life gain a lot of time, you're playing sacrifice your own creatures a lot of time. So a lot of these kind of costs, quote unquote, are actually not costs at all because you mitigate that in other ways. So maybe they didn't want to give black just another answer for something which wouldn't really cost them.
I think,
but flavorfully, it works.
Yeah, I think it's just taken them a long time to realize they can bend the color pie and they can change the ethos of colors if they justify it effectively. And as you say, there's an exchange of life for functionality. Like I was thinking, why do they do things like destroy target creature enchantment? You discard a card. Obviously, discarding a card semi-beneficial in a black deck. You're probably going to get it back from the graveyard, but there isn't. They should be trying to find ways to justify doing it rather than trying to find ways to justify not doing it. I do understand that there is a degree of, or once every color can do everything, what makes things different. But this does still feel very much like a black card. The fact it's sorcery kind of mitigates its being strictly better than like other removal spells. The fact that you can only do your opponent things that your opponent controls, so you can't destroy your own demon bargain or Liliana's contract and things like that to get around, that kind of thing. It works. So it's almost like they skirted the line with enough again with words, enough things that stopped it from being too good and feeling outside of the color wheel. And yeah, again, I don't think it's traders, but again, just add life loss to anything and it's a black card, right?
I mean, yeah, I mean, this makes it sound like I don't appreciate the color pie. Of course I do. It's the core of everything that the game is, and I think colors should be able to maybe do things that other colors can't and vice versa. But I just kind of feel that destroying enchantments, especially, enchantments are so good. The worst enchantment is still way better than any mid-range like artifact, for example, or mid-range creature. That every color needs a way to remove the permanence of the game in some fashion. You would never ever say, for example, that fighting with green, where it fights a creature and that's the creature removal for that color. You would never in a million years try and argue that that's not flavorful to that color, but it's creature removal. Like, it just does it in a different way. So I think, yeah, giving black, and they've tried it a couple of times in recent sets. We've had a couple of like Freaker's Libation is another.
We had one in the Commander,
removal.
didn't we? The one in the back of where you sacrifice a creature or enchantment. I think that was from the last Commander set. Obviously, this doesn't give you them the option. But yeah, I think this is where we're showing, like, bit by bit, they gave every color a bear. Two mana 2/2, which typically certain colors shouldn't have got. Like black and red shouldn't get 2/2s for 2. They should get 2/1s or whatever.
Mm.
It's like, again, circumstance, context, all that nonsense, and it's good that they finally breached it with this, because it shows that they are willing to push, and in certain environments it's going to be okay. And maybe there's just a few too many really, really good enchantments in the set that just needed answers. Which again,
Mm.
it's good for it's good for set balancing purposes. Even for color balancing purposes, there could be an argument against it. But I don't think I've seen anyone get up in arms about this.
No, if anything, I think this is people are going, oh, fucking finally, well done.
Yeah, exactly. And
So, yeah.
it's funny because it was on the list of like the sheet of all the different statements that were in the set of, oh, you win the game if this is thing, and then we're gonna have black enchantment removal. The fact you had to have it's going to have black enchantment in this black enchantment removal in the set, and everyone's like, oh my god, hype! It shows that clearly it was needed.
Yeah, and it's just a 2-mana common, and that's all it needs to be. It doesn't need to be some splashy rare or anything.
Exactly.
Yeah, really cool. Well, that's our 5 each. So your top 10 hype
That was an hour.
points. Yeah, that was an hour. I know. We're not going to talk about other things too much longer, but we are going to touch on it because I think we'd be remiss not to, especially if we're doing everything else next week. From this point on, guys, spoilers if you haven't seen the full-length trailer or haven't read any of the episodes of web fiction that have been on the mothership. We've only read the first episode because that is the only one that was out long enough for us to read it. As I said, episode 2 or web fiction. Article 2 on the web fiction. I don't know what they call them anymore. Literally came out an hour before we started recording, and we have lives and things to do. So from this point on, if you don't want to hear anything about those, then go and watch or read those and then come back to us. We're not going to do a story breakdown on each of them because I don't think we really need to, but there are some interesting points to take away from it. So firstly, let's talk about the full-length trailer. So we got the preview trailer, which was the Colney Heart flower being hit by rocks that we spoke about last week, and the Nahiri voiceover, which again, if you thought that was Nissa, you haven't been paying attention. So that was definitely Nahiri. Sorry to gatekeep that one, but there we go. The full-length trailer, yeah. I mean, first let's talk about the fact that it's a full-length trailer. So it was a good 3.5, 4 minutes long.
Crazy. When I looked, I was like, I haven't got time to just drop this into my day. I actually have to sit down and pay attention to this. Yeah, which is really...
Yeah. So they've obviously been doing full-length trailers. So I think the first really big trailer, which people went, whoa, was the War of the Spark one. And then they did a slightly more whimsical, slightly shorter one for Throne of Eldraine. And then they did the Joan Jett and the Black Hearts, bad reputation video for Ikoria with, what's her face?
Vivian.
The Green Planeswalker. There you go. God, there's too many of them nowadays. And they've all been roughly around the 2 minute, 3 minute mark, unless I'm misremembering. But this one is a full-on narrative. It's almost like the first scene of a film. And it's got characters with actual voice lines as opposed to having music in the background and having sort of silence or a voiceover a little bit. They've actually given characters full-on voice lines, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, we were wrong in the fact that there wasn't actually a pop song because we said
there wasn't any pop song.
Yeah, there was no music to it at all, which is amazing.
Yeah. As well as Nahiri being featured in the trailer, we also had 2 other characters. We had Zareth, who is the merfolk legendary from this set. Zareth the Trickster. Oh yeah, we'll talk about this in a second. Where is he? What's he called? Zareth.
Zareth's son. Yeah, he's
Zareth's son, the Trickster. Yeah,
Japanese apparently.
Well, yeah. And then we also had Akiri, as in Akiri Lineslinger. Looking a little bit different. She's got her big bulky armor on, as opposed to the kind of more lithe sort of leather gear that she was wearing in Akiri Lineslinger. Lithe's a creepy word. I regret using that word. The lithe gear that she was wearing. I apologise. We see them going into a Skyhaven ruin, and Nahiri's got an artifact, this kind of polyhedric orb. So I'm going to call it an orb, but obviously it's
like a lither stone, I think it's called, isn't it?
A lither stone, right. And we see an elemental coming after them because they've kind of raided this. It's a bit like Raiders of the Lost Ark, the sort of opening scene from that. And yeah, they learned nothing from the War of the Spark trailer because both Zareth and Akiri seemingly get killed in the space of the trailer. Now, this wouldn't necessarily be the biggest issue in the world if the second episode of the story online web fiction, which we haven't read yet, is about those 2 characters. So they've given away the ending to their story already.
Yeah. I mean, I think the idea is that the trailer is supposed to be halfway through, and what we'll do is we'll get a build-up of how Akiri and Zareth met Nahiri. Then obviously we'll get to that point of whether we're like, oh, that's the trailer bit, she's just got hold of the Litherstone, and then the second half of the story where we get into the nitty gritty, the meat and bones and everything, will be what she does with it. So
Mm.
yeah, I also don't think Akiri's actually dead, because as much as she was paralyzed when she got pushed off the side, she did start to flail her hands right at the end, and she is a line slinger. I feel like if she doesn't survive
Ah,
that,
that's a fair point.
yeah, I feel like
That is
she's
a fair
probably
point.
okay. But Zareth, yeah, Zareth's dead and gone. He ain't coming back.
So Zareth gets knocked out by the elemental that's chasing them. Akiri shows some magic prowess. She throws up a sort of like magic shield against a bash from the elemental. And then, Akiri steals the orb off Nahiri and a kind of like, oh my god, what is this thing? Why is this elemental trying to catch us? Nahiri grabs it off of her and freezes her or stasises her with a hedron, which Nahiri clearly can control the hedrons still, because it appears out of nowhere and she uses it to stasis snare Akiri, and then she pushes Nahiri off the edge of the cliff. Nahiri does this all the while sort of spouting the rhetoric of, I'm here to save Zendikar, this item will save Zendikar. So she's still filling that kind of anti-hero or kind of like deluded villain role. So we're still not quite sure. I'm sort of leaning like she's the villain, because that is kind of how she is in general.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the whole point is
Yeah.
that when she says she wants to restore Zendikar, like, there's been thousands of years since the Zendikar that she wants to restore has been in existence. And one of the things, we can kind of lead straight into, I guess, the web fiction off the back of this, because the idea is that these skyclaves, as much again with the retcon idea of like, we're kind of going back to see what Zendikar was before the Eldrazi had even touched it, and it turns out the core weren't the nicest of people. They were quite tyrannical, and if Nahiri is a representation of that kind of society, then clearly her views haven't all been, they have not all towed the line so far. Summoning Eldrazi to destroy a plane isn't okay. That's not cool. So I feel like one of the things we said is like, we've got two different protagonists, or say, so from their point of view, protagonists that are both trying to save the plane. I think clearly Nahiri's version of it isn't the way to go. I think the idea is that the orb that they've got, as you delightfully called it, Orb MacGuffin. I think the idea is that it absorbs energy from around it to then be able to like kind of do things like I think it has its own lithomancy abilities of where it can heal the stone structures, but it takes the life of everything around it. So what someone said was interesting, that maybe it takes all of the coloured mana from around it that isn't white, and then develop and then turns it and transmorphs it into white mana, which allows then the structures to kind of reform and heal themselves, which obviously going through Nahiri would be she's the perfect conduit for that anyway, because she's a fantastically powerful lithomancer herself.
Sure. So just to give a very brief, then just kind of give some context to those theories. Then I was right; they are called episodes. So I'm just looking at the Wizard's Story article. So episode 1, In the Heart of the Skyclave by A.T. Greenblatt, and they do have different writers for each of these stories, so they're going back to that. So I mean, firstly, let's just sort of say they've got web fiction again. And not only did they mention that they were going to have free web fiction that goes along with the story, and they announced it, they released this story like hours after the announcement dropped. So it was ready to go. It wasn't like they were finishing off or whatever. Like, they have it in the can. So, I mean, it's a shame, right? Because in principle, I really liked the idea of the ebooks as a way to legitimize the story in a kind of more artistic way, in a kind of poncy way, really, to get writers from outside of Magic that have kind of made it their career to do writing, as opposed to the in-house world team. And this wasn't to say that the web fiction before was bad. I just felt like, in my mind, I thought it was going to be something that we're going to continue like sort of parallel with each other. Like, the web fiction might kind of power down a little bit, and might just get like lead up stories to sets, but then the main bulk of the narrative would be in these ebooks. But instead of continuing the story in a kind of more polished way, the ebooks just seem to be very distracting. And even the better ones, like the Django Wexler one and the Kate Elliott one for Eldraine, even the better ones didn't seem to have enough match up with the story, that it was almost like it was an alternate universe of like Magic the Gathering, as opposed to actually following the set. So this is hopefully the return to them kind of, maybe this is what the fiction needs to be for Magic. Maybe Magic doesn't need and shouldn't have a more sort of formalized version of the stories. Maybe it should have these web fictions, because it's more directly tied into what, and more sort of viscerally there.
But you can get
I don't
less
know.
wrong.
That's a bigger question.
Well, you get less wrong, don't you, with having, like, I think we've said this before, if you give one author an entire slew of characters, especially like, say, War of the Spark, I mean, it's a great example, because you had so many characters you had to juggle. There was no way that wasn't going to get a little bit wrong for some people. Obviously, it was a lot of wrong for a lot of people. But I think that was just a matter of circumstance, of where I think what a lot of people have said is that even though the writing itself isn't necessarily as polished, there is some bits that are a little bit too kitsch or whatever. It feels more down to earth. It feels more reminiscent of obviously the stories that we were used to, and it feels more true to the set. It feels directly tied, as you say, directly tied in instead of just running alongside parallel. It's all well and good to have 400 pages of a story about a plane, but if you're also getting a 400 card set of cards about a plane, and those are two different things, it's like having two different two Star Trek series going on at the same time. As much as they don't have anything to do with each other, so it doesn't necessarily feel like they're informing and developing each other's worlds. It's separating the world building, not integrating the world building.
The Deep Space Nine Voyager complex.
Precisely,
yes.
exactly.
Sorry, just to go back to it then. In the Heart of the Skyclave, very, very quick overview. Nyssa and Nahiri both go into a sky ruin of an ancient core skyclave in search of some artifact that Nahiri has told Nyssa will help Zendikar regain its power. Both of them are Zendikari, born and bred, so this is something they're both very interested in. As they're going through the ruins, Nyssa, to help them find the way, uses her powers to summon an elemental. The elemental helps them get to this artifact, which Nahiri is a key. So Nahiri describes it as a key. So it's not the main artifact, the main MacGuffin, which is going to restore Zendikar, but it's part of the same sort of set of artifacts, and it has some of the same power, and it will help them find it in the future. This key is then used when a royal occurs, because throughout the story, Nahiri's getting more and more pissed off that the royals are still occurring. To stop the royal, Nahiri uses this key to kind of settle Zendikar down in the little area where they are, much to the horror of Nyssa, because it's discovered that the way that this artifact works is, as Nathan said earlier, by destroying the kind of living matter around, or at least the kind of elementals and plant life in the area to kind of fuel its power to stop the royal. This makes Nyssa and Nahiri bust up as soon as they become best friends, and they bust up over the course of the story. Nyssa goes off back to Ravnica to see Jace, who is still, it seems, heading up the Gatewatch in whatever form it is now. We're still not quite sure. She tries to get Jace and the Gatewatch on side to help her stop Nahiri from getting the rest of these artifacts. And Jace very quickly starts to think about what these artifacts can be used for in aid of the Gatewatch, as opposed to Nyssa's own personal quest. Nyssa gets pissed off at that and goes back to Zendikar. So we get a lot of things set up in this little story. And we'll see how it develops. I put here, one of the big things I kind of put down here was Jace and the Gatewatch may become antagonists or anti-villains later on. So especially if we're seeing this from the perspective of Nyssa, because Jace, even though he wasn't outwardly a dick to her, was very quick to be like, these artifacts sound quite powerful. I wonder if we can use them across the multiverse, which seems like a really dangerous road to go down if any of the media I consume is any indication. So I wonder if they're setting up the Gatewatch to be kind of these blind, like, sort of police force that go around the galaxy.
Yeah.
Because how would they always hint at it?
That's that.
They've always hinted at it. And there's always been this idea that whenever they go and do something, there's always these big consequences to their actions. But they usually felt quite personally by the characters that we're following. So maybe if we see it from Nyssa, who's now not part of the Gatewatch, seeing it from the outside looking in, they could become a bit of an issue.
Yeah, it does give some credence.
It'd be a nice flip round.
So it gives them some credence to that whole, like, oh, is he evil kind of thing from the artwork. And I wonder if maybe he was even, I wonder even if the artist, when he kind of like alluded to the fact of, oh no, I just wanted to give him some character if he was, double bluffing. Because maybe he gave him too much of an evil thing. And everyone's like, oh, is he evil now? It's like, shh, we weren't supposed to, he wasn't supposed to be so obvious immediately. I don't think so necessarily. I think that he's just being Jace. What I liked about this web fiction, it'll be the next point that you're going to say as well about, them doing something other than being planeswalkers. What I liked is it kind of gave some depth to their psychology. You saw Nyssa trying to be more outgoing. You saw her trying to be a bit more empathetic, sympathetic to people, and it's just not working. She keeps going through the episode going, what would Gideon do? Which I think is really cute. Yeah. The fact that you see Nahiri, the reason she's so angry against the royals, it keeps reminding her about how she fucked up and the damage that she did to Zendikar. So it's almost like her guilt keeps getting reminded, and obviously being the red-white crazy lady that she is, she's not reacting to it very well. And I guess then you also saw Jace clearly not quite being so good at listening to people. Sometimes I do just think that why don't people go up to him and go, can you just read my mind quickly about this one little thing, because it will give you everything you need to know in the emotional side of it. I mean, I know the whole point is, friends don't invade other people's minds, but it felt really weird that they seemed to almost like go back on the development we've seen of him. because I think that whole exchange at the end is this is one of these things where people say, oh, maybe some of the dialogue didn't quite fit, blah blah blah. You know, the typical things that people complain about web fiction when their characters aren't handled exactly how they want them to be. I even put down, I just think it is odd the way that he reacted, and maybe it just didn't come across properly. And then Nissa, being the awkward person as she is, didn't have time to wait around for it, so she dashed back off to Zendikar again.
Something I will say, because you are 100% right, where it does seem that Jace was very much in Jace world, whereas recently we've seen him learn to be a bit more empathetic to the larger cause through like the sort of leadership of Gideon. One thing I will say though is that in the story, Nissa is surprised that Jace isn't immediately angry at her for basically being aloof for most of the final parts of their adventures as the Gatewatch before War of the Spark and everything that kind of transpired over War. But so I think that does show a growth on Jace's part, that he was very quick to be like, oh, Nissa, it's you. I'm really glad to see you. And is kind of almost just is taking up a leadership role where he's still clearly the head of the Gatewatch, and he's clearly got all of these kind of sort of admin responsibilities, which before he wasn't necessarily too in tune with, much to the detriment of Ravnica, because he kind of negged on his responsibility as the Guild Pack. So I think we have seen a bit of a growth of Jace, but maybe because he's in the story, we find out he's still the only one other than Ugin that knows that Bolas is in the meditation
big
realm.
thing of maybe he feels there's it was even mentioned in the story about there's this massive weight on his shoulders, and I reckon that will be a big driving force for his character going forwards. And I reckon Nicol Bolas will eventually break out. I hope it's not anytime soon, because eventually this leaks and someone tries to get there to try and go, no, we finish him off for good, and it breaks open the coffer and he's back out. That kind of thing. I could see that happening quite easily.
But yeah, my last little point on the web fiction, just as a kind of, because we can't think about it too much because it's literally the first episode, and hopefully this will be going on now for weeks. But the last sort of little point I made on it is it's nice to see planeswalkers doing planeswalkery things that isn't just fighting each other or like another big planeswalker, because that is essentially the big story arc that we've had since the last time that we're
conflict
at Zendikar, with the
after conflict
after conflict. Whereas this story, as much as they did have to fight a beast and they did have to fight a Felidar and they did have to do these like little bits of combat, it was more about them showing off against each other. So the opening kind of scene is them trying to reach the Sky Haven in the sky and kind of try and traverse all these big floating rock formations. And Nahiri's using her lithiumancy, Nissa's using her like elemental powers and her kind of green mage shit, whatever that's called.
Botany.
And it's, botany, her magic botany. And it was just nice to see them being these ultra powerful sorcerers in the context of just being able to sit on one plane and flex a little bit without it necessarily being just, oh, and then he threw an energy thing at this person, and then this person threw a bolt at this person.
Yeah, as much as they were like 2 miles up in the air, it felt a lot more grounded. It was quite nice.
Yeah, I did. I enjoyed it. So yeah, that's the web fiction, and hopefully continuing forwards, it will be of a similar, if not better, quality and relevance to the actual cardboard.
It also seems to justify Nissa's move into black quite well. It's setting up this idea of where she has to be single-minded, she has to do things selfishly because no one around her is understanding, and she's failing to... I don't think it's her failing. I think she's just obviously talking to the wrong people. Jason and Hiri aren't exactly standing members of society. But I think it's quite interesting to see that, this is how a green mage will eventually become more black inspired, because they no one around them is kind of helping their or seeing their point of view. So they have to do it by themselves. They have to be single-minded and kind of narcissistic about it.
And you know what? I'm up for a Nissa does things her way storyline, because Nissa, by her very nature, is a very aloof character who doesn't seem to bond with other people, who is always kind of away, half 1 foot in the elemental realm, half 1 foot in the physical. And it would be nice to see her doing something other than just kind of lazily drifting off and summoning a big elemental. Like, I can't wait to see her get a bit more like hands-on and go and kick some ass.
I think one of the best moments is when she bodily lifts, I can't remember what it is in the story, but she bodily lifts something, and here he looks and goes, it was like, how are you even lifting that? It's like, she's a super strong elf. You don't want a backhand from Nissa. Like, I think it's giving her a bit more. It's almost funny how long it's been since we've known about her and how little character development we've had for her specifically. It felt like we got like 60% more just from this one little story across the entirety of the time we've known her. So yeah, I think I like it's a really good sign for how they're going to handle the stories, and hopefully give our characters a bit of gravity and agency outside of just what's the next thing we're fighting.
Yeah. Well, that's it, guys. I mean, that was our initial hype for Zendikar. I know we both sound a little bit tired. We've both had very long weeks, but we are genuinely hyped for this set. And I'm sure the more that spoilers come out, and the more web fiction we get, and the more kind of storyline that gets built up, every point that we've made, I'm really confident is going to be reinforced. Next week, we will be then diving into all of the stuff that they released for next year, and maybe talking about maybe some of the web fiction that's come out in the time since we spoke today. Maybe we'll do a big story breakdown at a different time. I don't know. We'll find out how it goes, because God, it's been so long since we've had web fiction.
Well, exactly, that too. Yeah, we've also got a week of spoilers, and it's like, who knows what's going to come out. And we don't necessarily want to do like a card by card breakdown, but obviously there's so much on the cards that, I mean, I know we've already kind of like espoused our love of the visuals and the aesthetics and everything, so we might not need to do that so much. But yeah, we'll see. They might release another 3 sets by next week, Andy, by their regular standards, so who knows.
Oh God, I really hope they slow down, because we haven't even spoken about
we didn't even talk about, yeah, exactly. I was literally just saying,
next week.
Good.
Yes, guys, we've just released on our YouTube channel, Magic the Flavouring on YouTube, which you can go and please subscribe to, so you can keep updated with all of us. Nice little plug. We've just released our interview with Titus Lunter. We've now got that in video form. So do go check that out if you didn't catch it the first time around, or if you want to re-listen to it, but this time with visuals, so you get a bit more context, especially for a lot of his ArtStation stuff. Titus allowed us to, with credits obviously, to use some of his ArtStation images. So yeah, do go check it out. You can find us on Twitter at mtflavouring, where Nathan and I discuss with the wider Twitter world about Magic the Gathering and all good things like that. Do hit those follow buttons on the YouTube and the Twitter, because it does give us direct feedback, which is a little less tangible with things like the podcast. That you guys listening and that you're into what we're doing. So do go hit those follow buttons if you've not done so already. Emails go to menti blah blah blah. Emails go to I don't know, wherever you want to put them. Emails go to mtflavouring@gmail.com. My personal Twitter is at AndyManface. Nathan's, yours is
at the Fox in the Moon.
Do you have any final words for this episode?
God, no, I can barely form sentences, Andy. I don't know what else you want from me.
Well, other than that huge insight into Nathan's mental state right now, all that's left for me to say is thank you so much for listening. This has been Magic the Flavouring.
We'll see you soon.